Once upon a time, I was packing my bag, ready to travel to India for a film. I was so happy. Um, it was the end of my first year out of drama school, and I felt a real sense of momentum building. My bag was open on the floor with a few of the essentials already in it. I was simply waiting for that final phone call to confirm the last minute details before finishing packing. I got the opposite kind of call. My agent rang with a gentle, slow, and apologetic tone. It didn't come together, I'm afraid. I was devastated. 1 year out into the industry meant I still got very wobbly when it came to rejections. Probably something to do with the fact that I used to spend an enormous amount of time focusing on what decision the producers would make rather than focusing on what I could control. Understandably, first year out, come on. Okay, anywho, I was sad. Sad. So I packed up my fly fishing gear and a just some spare clothes, and I headed to the mountains. 8 hours later, I was in a I was in a hostel room alone. Apparently, no one wants to go to the ski fields when there isn't snow. I got dressed into my waders, put on all the gear that made me look like I knew what I was doing when I actually didn't, and stood in the snow melt temperature river trying to catch a trout. One thing I love about getting back into nature is that it doesn't take much time for me to be coaxed back into the present. I can remember seeing some kind of floating rodent pop up about 10 feet away from me. I grew up in Africa where the wildlife is very different. So when I saw my first platypus, I really didn't know what to make of it. So no fish, but one platypus, still a big win. I decided to call it a day and head back to my empty hostel room to eat alone. On my way home, there was a sign outside an equestrian centre: Buck Brannaman Horsemanship Clinic, $50 to watch. Obviously, I turned into the driveway and I poked my head into the big barn. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on a fence for the next 3 days straight, watching the world's leading horse whisperer work with horses. This is the man that the author of The Horse Whisperer used as inspiration for the novel, and whose documentary, which is just called Buck, it won Sundance back in 2010. Okay, this was one of the most wonderful few days of my life, and certainly one of the greatest craft experiences I've ever had. Everything Buck was talking about, I thought, remarkably related to acting. I felt like I was home. I I knew that horses cost a lot of money and required a ton of land and time and effort, but I remember feeling like I had found one of the most meaningful things in my life. And still, to this day, I know deep down that getting good at riding horses is one of the most worthwhile things I could do with my time on this earth. All right, just stick with me on this one. So, a year later, I was cast in my first series. I got the role of the antagonist for the first season of a new network show set in the 50s. And guess what? This meant horses. And as each episode was sent to me in the mail, I would snatch it out of the mailman's poor hands and dive into bed and flick through to find when I would be required to show off some horse skills. That page never came. It turns out I was the only character in the show to not ride a horse. I had a beat up old pickup truck instead. And how many times I stalled that thing during takes, that's, yeah, that's another story. Okay, so I was frustrated, but, oh, that cable, that needs to stay in. But I wasn't phased. I looked up who the horse wrangler was, the extraordinary Graham Ware Jr. Four generations of horse wrangling for film and TV. The very man who worked with Vigo on Lord of the Rings. I found his number, called him up. Everyone got horse riding lessons with him except me, but I was happy to fork out for my own private lessons. I just wanted to get better at this craft, which I thought was really beautiful. And Graham listened patiently and very graciously invited me to his farm. So off I went, brand new arms ready to get muddy, and the lessons began. I'd ridden horses every Wednesday afternoon growing up as a kid, thanks to my mother's patience and generosity. But a decade later, I had some tuning up to do. I was very hungry, I was very determined, and everything Graham mentioned, I soaked it up. Yep, more. Every instruction I would ask why and dissect it as much as I could until it felt simple enough in my mind that I could repeat it alone. And then something happened. I think it was after the third session, Graham just started to go quiet. And I remember spending about half an hour riding in circles before I just couldn't hold back anymore, and I just burst out loud. It's like, is there anything I can do? Is there anything I can work on? Again, I was just so desperate to improve at this craft, which I thought was really meaningful, and I was really passionate about it. And I remember Graham just smiling, and he took a breath and said, "Mate, at this point, there's nothing else to talk about. You just need time in the saddle." I sighed. I knew exactly what he meant. All of my passion and my drive and my determination and excitement, I'd wobbled off the path. I was more interested in feeling like I was getting better than actually doing the work required to get better. What's my point? I think there comes a time when thinking and feeling can slip over into replacing actions which result in actual progression. Sometimes the most important thing I can do is just get some time in the saddle. No more talking, no more thinking, just ride. Get those reps in which can't be replaced by anything else. They can't be replaced by talking. They can't be replaced by thinking. Just ride. I hope this helps.